As we get started into the panel discussion, I just want to show you a short video from Microsoft, which will hopefully give you a sense of what we're about to discuss. And as you look at the video, just keep in mind one data point, which is that half the world's population lives in an area without internet access, half the world's population. And as we watch the video, I'll ask our panelists to just join us on stage.
Half the world does not have access to the internet. Without it, you are limited in what you can do, what impact you can have. So Microsoft partnered with the local startup and found a way to use TV waves to bring affordable internet virtually anywhere.
In the next 5-10 years, we'll be producing doctors and engineers from this area. Internet can change the life of people from this place.
So I'm joined for this special session by Shelley McKinley, who's the head of technology and corporate responsibility at Microsoft, by Enrique Iglesias, who's a telecom specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank, by Peter Ibb, who's the CEO of Bluetown, and by Alex Haddon, who's the director of structured finance at OPIC. And I say this is a special session because we've got a big announcement. But before the announcement, I wanted, Shelley, you to just give us a sense of why this issue of connectivity matters so much.
Sure. Well, I mean, you just said in the beginning, half the world's population doesn't have access to the internet. We actually had a major milestone in 2018, and that was when just over half of the world's population did get access to some form of connectivity, not like we enjoy in the developing countries, but some form of connectivity. And what that means is we can be really proud of that, but there's another almost half of the globe that does not have access to modern technology. And so what that means is ultimately people living in those areas don't have the opportunities that their neighbors have in developing countries and in urban centers around the world, leaving them without access to advances in agriculture, medicine, educational opportunities that the rest of us enjoy. And this disproportionately impacts rural communities, it disproportionately impacts developing countries, it disproportionately impacts women. And so ultimately what that means is that the inequalities that exist today will persist and they will worsen, and we'll have a harder time to actually pull people out of these situations.
Yeah, there's a new book out, Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft. Yes. After you finish reading my book, the very next book you can read is Brad's book called Tools and Weapons. And he makes a point in the book, which I have to agree with, that broadband is really like the electricity of the 21st century, right? That, you know, it's now so fundamental. And if you think about it, if any of us were, you know, if our access to the internet were taken away, our careers would be over. In many ways, the ways we live would be over, right? It's not a nice thing to have anymore.
Yeah, if you were sitting here in this room and the internet went out, I bet people would get quite uncomfortable pretty immediately. They would start wondering, how are they going to talk to their children? How are they going to do all the things they need to every day just sitting here in this room? Probably the thing that would make people the most uncomfortable.
So I want to get to your announcement because sure. I know that this is a big challenge, and we're going to talk in a moment about some of the processes that are underway to try to address it globally. I mean, half the world's population is not an easy thing, but you're taking kind of a big dent in that today, or at least planting a flag in it. What is the announcement, Shelley?
Well, that's why I'm here today at Devex from Microsoft. I think you know, some people are surprised when they see companies like Microsoft sitting on a stage like this with all of our great counterparts in all the development agencies. If you followed any of the work that we've done in the United States over the last couple of years, where we're starting to help connect people through a program called Airband, that didn't start in the US. That's a group of projects we've been doing around the world for the better part of a decade. And so I'm excited to announce today a new approach that we have internationally. I want to tell you a little bit about our approach, our goals, and what we're planning to do. With our partners, we plan to connect at least 40 million people around the world by 2022, building on everything we've done over the course of the last decade and everything we've done in the US over the course of the last 2 years to bring connectivity to people who today are unconnected.
So let me just underline that for those of you who may have missed it. 40 million people in 3 years are going to get connected. You're going to do this through new technologies that I know Microsoft is pioneering and pushing. TV white spaces is one of those. We're going to get a lot more into that conversation, but just tell us a little bit more. What are some of the geographies? Tell us a little bit more about the announcement, what this really means.
Sure. So we'll be focusing on areas that today really are unconnected. So Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, continuing projects that we have going in India, all of the areas where really internet can make a huge difference and they're today vastly unconnected. And we'll do that through taking, as you've been talking about, innovation, new creative approaches. We think fundamentally based on our experience, we learned probably 3 things. Technology, new innovative technology is important. Working with great partners is really important. As is funding from international development agencies. So things like TV white spaces, which is internet delivered over the television spectrum, can bring affordable, reliable access very quickly to people around the world. So that's one thing we'll be focusing on. We also need to make sure as we're doing this that we're working with regulators around the world, because in many cases regulation has just not kept up to speed with new innovative approaches. We'll be working with partners like Bluetown here on the panel that are focused on areas and understanding the needs and are committed to bringing that affordable access quickly, as well as then international development agencies. And we've worked with the Inter-American Development Bank to do some great things recently in Colombia to connect like 12% ultimately of the population.
Well, this is a very exciting announcement. We're going to be following it closely, everybody here in this room and all of us at Devex. I want to get more into the discussion, and I want to bring Alex into it because it still is a little mind-boggling that half the world doesn't have access to internet when you think that it's a business, right? I mean, there are companies like Microsoft, there are more traditional companies in the space like telcos. Why isn't there a business model that has gotten to the people in the world who need access? You invest at OPIC in businesses that try to get access to people. What's the challenge in your mind?
Thank you. This tough act to follow here with the announcement with Microsoft. Yeah, fundamentally, large corporations and mobile network operators in most markets, the markets that OPIC works in anyways, which are is the developing world, they have a hard time addressing poor populations in rural communities. And the reality is that the banking world, which the development finance community is part of, understands how to bank large telcos. They have assets that we can underwrite. But if we're going to address that 49% that's unattended, as it were, we're going to have to recognize that new business models are ready and appropriate for all types of financing, equity, anything in between, debt. And I think that from OPIC's perspective, an institution that has supported businesses and de-risked investments through debt financing, political risk insurance, investing in private equity funds, we see our role really probably through 2 mechanisms. One is partnerships. This announcement from Microsoft is a great example of a statement to the market that they're looking for people to work with new business models and new technologies, and OPIC would love to be a part of that. And then the other side of it is our institution's going through a transition. We will be, in the coming months, rebranded and given some new tools. We'll be the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. We'll have some equity authority. We'll have some grant authority. And that is part of a recognition that it takes all types of tools as well as all types of partners to reach that 49%.
And what do you think that's going to mean specifically for connectivity now that you're going to have these new authorities? How big is your current investment portfolio in this area? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, of the $24 billion in exposure we have, only $1 billion of it is in telecom. And so, the conversation is that enough? And I think, as Shelley said, with recognition that connectivity is kind of a new utility, it probably isn't. And building the portfolio for us means that we need to build a pipeline of opportunities. And so I know a lot of the Microsoft team here. They have a large pipeline of opportunities that they would love for people to get involved in. I'm working the room trying to find the next great thing. But working with those opportunities will only work if we realize that we're going to have to use things like TV white space, unlicensed technology to serve the next segment. We're going to have to use radio access network equipment that maybe bankers weren't comfortable with 5 years ago. And if we can recognize that those models have real value and can generate income alongside generating service, then I think the future's bright.
It looks like we're going to need some kind of industry disruption here. This is part of it, the announcement today. Enrique, I want to hear from your side at the Inter-American Development Bank. What are you doing to help foster that disruption that needs to happen in this space?
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. So the Inter-American Development Bank basically lends money to Latin American countries and companies to foster socioeconomic development. And under some years ago, we started working in connectivity under the understanding that this is one of the main tools to foster that socioeconomic development. We started from the beginning our collaboration with Microsoft, and it was very useful, not only the technology side. So, for example, we are launching, in line with what we did in Colombia last year, a new initiative with TV White Spaces in El Gran Chaco. This is a very rural area and connected between Argentina and Paraguay. But also, I think our collaboration with Microsoft and other partners has been very useful in order to bring regulatory frameworks and public policies to the state of development that they need, no? Because we find a lot of countries that are, they have like telecommunications law from the 90s, for example, that the concept of broadband didn't even exist. So we think that's also very important in order to get the ecosystem to work.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that a multilateral development bank like IDB can do that's hard for other players to do, because you're meeting with ministers of finance, you're meeting with prime ministers, you've got money to provide if they can get the regulatory frameworks right. I know you've got a concept called digital bonds that you're thinking about. Tell us more about how that would work.
Exactly. So the idea behind these digital bonds would be to take advantage of some of the assets that the governments nowadays have and they are not using. This could be, for example, the spectrum that is not auctioned, the income from the Universal Service Fund, this is something that's taking place every year and is going to take place for a number of years.
Predictable revenues.
Exactly, predictable revenue that could be brought to the present value. And other assets like, for example, the transmission lines or other public infrastructure, value all these assets, and with that issue a bond that could be used to finance the projects that are defining the digital agenda. So with this, we would, or governments would achieve like two objectives. The first, they would get the money to fund the initiatives that they need, and the second would be to make sure that these revenues that otherwise might go to other places from a spectrum or from the Universal Service Fund are devoted to the digital development.
I mean, green bonds, this is what makes me think of, green bonds have been very successful. Is this similar? Like, do you think there's huge potential here? Or what stage of development is this at?
That would be a similar concept from our side. Like, I work with the public sector, so it would be like a sovereign digital bond, what we were thinking of. But a digital bond, we think it's something that could be very useful in the private markets as well, under the understanding that it would be like we could define what are the impacts or the results that outcomes that we can measure, and align that with the objectives of different funds that are willing to invest in that.
So one issue is, of course, getting the billions of dollars kind of at the high level of public finance into this. But Peter, you at Bluetown are thinking about how do you actually reach the customer at the last mile? What is the technology that you use? So how do you see this challenge of reaching the last half of the global population?
Yeah, so basically we are a last mile connectivity provider and doing this every day. Build on the vision of connecting the unconnected, that's what we're doing. And what we realized from day one is that if you want to do this, then first of all, you need to have a very robust and cheap solution that is able to stand out in these tough locations for a long time. You also need to reach scaling. If you don't reach scaling, then it's a very, very tough business environment to be in. But once you reach the scaling, then there are a lot of advantages you will gain. And then lastly, disrupting the business model so that you start getting revenue streams on this connectivity beyond just taking people's money in these very poor areas, so that you start generate interest from international level on the possibilities you build when you start connecting all these amounts of people out there. So yeah, those are the key things.
In some ways, the telecom market is very developed and advanced in many parts of the world, and that's because we're all paying out of our own pockets large amounts of money to telcos. But in the environments and the markets we're talking about, people can't afford to pay a lot. So what are the business models that actually get them connectivity?
Yeah, I guess our claim is that if the existing telco infrastructure and the business model could solve the problem, it would have been solved a long time ago. I mean, which telco doesn't want to attract billions of customers? So something is not right in the current setup on the telco side if you want to address these very poor areas. So our perspective is on technology side much simpler, typically based on Wi-Fi or utilizing TE white space, as we do in collaboration with Microsoft. Decentralized installation, so that you basically put much fewer towers up than you would do if you're a telco where you have blanket coverage. And then very high emphasis on the whole content side of things. So being able to distribute content to these people in these villages means that you can start addressing Ministry of Education, providing e-learning to the kids. You could take healthcare, going to global funds, etc. You could also take more commercial activities like farming, agriculture, start to collaborate with large players in that space.
So this is the revenue model. You get, instead of getting money from the customer, you're getting money from health initiatives, ag initiatives, education initiatives.
In a commercial viable manner. So it's not about donations, it's about a sustainable business model. But rethinking the whole aspect until you create the growth. That's a very important key figure for us. If you increase the connectivity with 10% in a given country or region, you increase the GDP with 1.2% over a couple of years. So there's a lot of growth out there. It's just about getting the whole development kick-started.
Shelley, I want you to close us out here with a thought. Obviously, 40 million is a big number. That's sort of the headline of the story. Mm-hmm. But what are you hoping to achieve? I mean, Microsoft's not a telco. What big picture are you hoping to achieve with this big announcement today?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 40 million is the starting point today. And when you think about the opportunity we have to bring together people on this panel, people in this room to all work for a better future for everyone and a sustainable future for everyone, as Peter's just talked about, because that is a key component to it. I think 40 million is the start. I think the sky is the limit on how many people we can ultimately cover. I would love to be back here at Devex next year in London and tell you 40 million, that was nothing when we said that last year. This is what we've done over the course of this year by being innovative, being open to new approaches to connect the planet so that we can really bring everyone up.
In many ways, connectivity is a microcosm of what we're talking about all day today, which is that the pieces of the puzzle are there. The money is there, the technology is there, the partners are there. Putting it together is not easy, though. And this is an important announcement today because you're putting it out there and saying, we're going to make this happen, we want to do this. So we're moving now into a networking break, which I think is a great chance for everyone to meet the team at Microsoft and OPIC, and others here are looking to find opportunities to work together. I encourage you to do that. And please join me in congratulating Microsoft and thanking this fantastic panel.